Tom Petty once told an interviewer that everything in his life came down to a handful of moments, some triumphant, some unbearable. In 2017, just weeks before he died, he confided that one moment from 1979 had haunted him for decades. Someone he loved was dying, and instead of staying, he walked away. The guilt stayed with him through every record, tour, and relationship. It shaped the way he worked, the way he loved, and the way he tried unsuccessfully to outrun pain. He was born on October 20, 1950, in Gainesville, Florida, a quiet southern town where Victorian houses and moss-covered oaks hid the turmoil inside his home. His father, Earl, drank heavily and erupted in sudden rages. By age 5, Tom was already learning to disappear when he heard his father's footsteps. After he accidentally dented a stranger's Cadillac with a slingshot, Earl beat him with a belt until his body swelled with welts. Tom's mother, Kitty, gentle, musical, and chronically ill, cleaned his wounds in silence. She was the safe place in the house, but she absorbed her own share of pain, from epilepsy to cancer to Earl's moods. At 10 years old, Tom experienced a moment that redirected his entire life. His uncle, who worked in the film business, took him to the set of Follow That Dream in nearby Ocala. Elvis Presley walked by, glowing like a force of nature, and shook Tom's hand. That was it. Tom traded his slingshot for a stack of Elvis records and played them endlessly. Music became stronger than fear, stronger than the chaos at home. By the early 1960s, Tom was forming bands, lying his way into gigs, and practicing in wooden sheds stuffed with old carpets. He escaped the house through sound, while his younger brother Bruce avoided their father through sports. At 14, Tom formed the Sundowners, won local band competitions, and felt the first spark of what life could be. But even that early success came with violence. After an argument at a frat house gig, the drummer beat him badly, and Tom's mother wept when she saw him. He stuck with music anyway. He let his hair grow long, drawing stares in conservative Gainesville, and fell in with Mike Campbell and Benmont Tench, two musicians whose talent and loyalty would follow him across decades. Together they formed Mudcrutch, rehearsed in a rundown farmhouse, played 6-hour nights at rowdy bars, and worked landscaping jobs by day. They lived on almost nothing, but they believed deeply in the music. In 1974, Tom married his high school girlfriend, Jane Benyo. Their daughter Audria was born that same year. But the marriage soon strained under the weight of Tom's obsession with music and Jane's growing emotional struggles. Still, he pushed forward. At 23, he left Florida with Mudcrutch and drove to Los Angeles with borrowed gas money and a box of demos. Within days, record labels lined up to hear them. Shelter Records signed them, but the band couldn't keep up with the pressures of studio life and dissolved by late 1975. Tom stayed in LA broke and determined. Then, in 1976, he reunited with Campbell and Tench, and with Stan Lynch and Ron Blair they became Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They recorded 15 songs in 15 nights, working from sunset to sunrise, and released their debut in November 1976. The album sold poorly at first, but a year later British audiences embraced them wildly. American Girl and Breakdown turned them into a formidable live act, and soon they were traveling the world. By 1979, success collided with chaos. Shelter Records was sold to MCA without consulting him, violating what he believed was a fundamental promise. He refused to be bought and sold, and MCA sued him repeatedly, blocking him from recording or performing. He went into the studio anyway, paying out of pocket until he'd sunk more than $500,000 into what would become Damn the Torpedoes. He eventually filed for bankruptcy to void his contracts, a move that shocked the industry but worked. Even as his personal life unraveled, the album was a commercial breakthrough and made him a rock icon. But pressure followed success. Ron Blair drifted away. Tom's marriage deteriorated as Jane's emotional instability worsened. Their daughter witnessed scenes that scarred the family, and Tom buried himself in work. By the early 1980s, drugs were everywhere, tensions were high, and Tom's perfectionism pushed him to a breaking point. Recording Southern accents, he punched a wall in frustration and shattered his hand, nearly ending his ability to play guitar. He recovered, but the emotional toll lingered. The mid-1980s brought more turmoil. The band experimented with cocaine. Fans misinterpreted the Confederate flag imagery used on stage. Tom publicly admitted the mistake years later and regretted it deeply. Yet there were bright moments. He formed the Traveling Wilburys with George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Bob Dylan, and Roy Orbison, creating some of the most joyful music of his life. Still, the losses mounted. Orbison died in 1988. Epstein, who replaced Blair, spiraled into heroin addiction, stealing studio money, missing sessions, and wasting away. Tom had him fired in 2002, a decision he regretted but couldn't undo. Epstein died the next year. Tom's personal battles were no less painful. After divorcing Jane in 1996, he fell into heroin himself, using alone and hiding it from nearly everyone. He relapsed multiple times. Dana York, the woman who eventually became his second wife, helped pull him out of it. They married in 2001, but his body was already deteriorating from decades of smoking and the toll of constant touring. He suffered emphysema, knee problems, and a fractured hip that never healed. He kept performing through immense pain, relying on prescription opioids to keep moving. All the while, the guilt he carried from 1979 never eased. When his mother was dying of cancer, he walked into her hospital room and saw the walls covered with clippings about him. Too overwhelmed to speak, he turned around, left, and didn't return, not even for the funeral. He called it the worst cowardice of his life, a wound he never forgave himself for. His regrets extended to Stan Lynch, whom he fired without reconciling, to Howie Epstein, whom he couldn't save, and to Jane, whom he avoided as she deteriorated mentally. He wrote in his journal that he had watched people fall apart while he fled into work, into touring, into anything other than facing pain directly. In 2017, despite a fractured hip and severe respiratory issues, he embarked on the Heartbreakers' 40th anniversary tour. He limped backstage and was carried in a golf cart between rooms, but on stage he still radiated the force that had carried him since Elvis shook his hand. The final show was September 25th at the Hollywood Bowl. Just 1 week later, on October 2nd, he was found unconscious at home and died that evening at age 66. The coroner ruled it multisystem organ failure caused by a combination of fentanyl, oxycodone, benzodiazepines, and other medications taken for pain. His hip had fully broken that day. After his death, his family released collections of unreleased music, songs that showed his heart at its rawest.